San Francisco 49ers at 5-6, trying to make an unexpected run to the postseason. They will continue their season playing their home games in Arizona. They're practicing on the grass fields outside of State Farm Stadium. And there are other coaches who envy this gig that Kyle Shanahan has, because there are other coaches who wish they could create a de facto bubble. That's what the 49ers have, to the point where it's work and it's straight to the hotel room. Here's Kyle Shanahan talking about his concerns that players may feel disconnected from the world and isolated, and he's concerned about the mental health of some of his players. Here he is from yesterday.
I just try to tell everyone, no matter what, when someone has a problem, whatever it is, there's no problem too big or too small. And a lot of guys keep that stuff internally. But, I met with a bunch of the players, and I grabbed about 20 of them last night and just told them to look out for that stuff and make sure that whether they come to me, a position coach, we have lots of people here who aren't coaches or players who can help people. So it's just understanding that it's human nature. Some stuff's going to come up over the next 3 weeks, and no one ignore it. Just always bring it to someone's attention, because the worst thing you could be in these situations is feel kind of alone on an island, and we got a big group going through it, so we can rally together and make sure we help each other through it.
And that's a great point. He added that he talked to about 20 players and told them, please keep an eye on your teammates. If anyone is struggling with the isolation, let's talk about it. Let's be aware of it. And let's deal with it. And Peter, when I hear him speak and I think about what everyone is going through, we're all frustrated. We're all upset. And maybe the Ebron comments, maybe the sarcastic remark made by Ben Roethlisberger, it's just a way of coping. So, I don't know that a lot of these complaints that are made really are, serious, back to the wall type of, I hate this and this isn't right and this isn't fair. Sometimes it's just what you do to get through a day when you feel like everything sucks.
Look, the 49ers are a great example of a team that, I don't know how they're going to end up, Mike. I really don't. But they are quite literally getting on their buses to go to the airport on Saturday, and they start seeing tweets from the county of Santa Clara that all of a sudden, when they get back home, they're going to have to leave because they're going to be orphans. They're not going to be allowed to play or practice at their home facility. So that's a fine how do you do. You get on the plane, you go to the Rams, in a game that you're a significant underdog, and somehow, some way, you find a way to win that game against the Rams. A huge game that all of a sudden makes you 5-6 and keeps you in the muddled playoff hunt for the 6th or 7th seed in the NFC. And what is interesting to me, when they came home and then started figuring out what they were going to do, they don't know whether they're going to San Diego. They don't know whether they're going to Oakland. They don't know where they're going. And so they picked Glendale, Arizona. And Mike, you know what they have done in Glendale? They basically have become the Arizona Cardinals in training camp, staying at the Cardinals training camp hotel, taking over all of their meeting space and indoor. It's an indoor convention center, basically, taking over all that space. Yesterday, when I talked to people there, they were building a weight room, in that space so that guys this week could, get focused and get going. They got the Buffalo Bills coming in on Monday. And so the other interesting thing for everyone to know about this, because this isn't like just going to an away game, if you're a player for the 49ers, your family can come to Arizona, and your family can stay somewhere nearby, and you can visit them. Now, there's going to be, I'm sure, some strict rules about that, but this isn't a situation where they have to stay penned up in their hotel rooms. And so that's going to be a tricky little scenario for Kyle Shanahan to manage over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, the families can basically get an Airbnb type of a thing, and the player will commute back and forth just as if he were at home, which does puncture that bubble a little bit. Shanahan said yesterday they're going to try to not be part of the city while they're there, and my guess is that he's hoping that a maximum number of guys end up just seeing it through the next 5 weeks, stay in the hotel, be away from the community and reduce the potential for catching the virus. Again, there are other coaches who are looking at this saying, this is a pretty good gig if you can get it, because I no longer have to worry about my guys going at home every night and coming back potentially positive for COVID-19 any given day, and then all of the dominoes that fall because of that. Now, I'm told the NFL Players Association did not give the NFL or the 49ers a hard time about this, even though the 49ers are taking the players out of their normal routine, out of their homes, away from their families, and moving them to Arizona for 5 weeks. There's an acknowledgement that certain things just have to be done, and they make sure that it's done in a way that is safe for the players. And again, from a virus standpoint, it is safer for the players. Now, one of the practical considerations, Peter, that I'm glad you mentioned, the 49ers behaving essentially like the Cardinals at training camp. One big difference, they're not using the field at State Farm Stadium to practice on. The Cardinals use that field extensively, and there are times early in the season where it looks rough. But they're going to be playing 6 games on that field now in roughly a 4-week window. So I'm hoping that the grounds crew there does everything they can to make sure the field doesn't get torn up and become a safety hazard for the players when you're doubling essentially the workload that field's going to have. And some may say, oh, that's no big deal. No, there are some bad fields in the NFL, and one of the reasons fields get bad is through overuse. So I'm hoping they have a plan in place to ensure that there's an appropriate playing surface for everyone that's going to be on there for the rest of the season.
Mike, the other interesting part of this story that people might not realize is that so the 49ers have been told by the county of Santa Clara, basically, we are not allowing any group activities or athletic events until at least December 21. We will reconsider our decision based on the spread and how many people are getting COVID in our county by December 21. So theoretically, it's possible if they call off the ban, the 49ers could come home on December 21 or 22. They would have to turn around 3 or 4 days later, fly on Christmas afternoon, December 25, to play in Arizona on December 26. So this is one of the all-time weird, odd schedules, and also not just schedules, because that's still uncertain. It's just totally one of the weirdest scenarios that a team has ever had to play through. And keep in mind, this is the team that started the season playing in New Jersey against the Jets, going to the Greenbrier in West Virginia for the week, coming back to New Jersey, playing the Giants. And by the end of that 8 days, half their team was hurt and gone for the year. And I'm exaggerating, but this has been a bizarre, just weird year for the 49ers. And I'll tell you, if somehow they end up making the playoffs, I mean, I'm not saying vote Kyle Shanahan Coach of the Year for keeping this together, but oh my God, give that team some sort of award for figuring out how to make all this work.
And they're going to be ready to make some noise in the postseason if they get there after everything they've been through. And one quick note on Santa Clara, there has been an awkward and ugly political dynamic between Santa Clara and the 49ers ever since the 49ers moved into Levi's Stadium. And there's been some barbs traded back and forth this week. I'm going to be writing something about it after the show today. But that's part of it too. And, you know, I'm cynical about everything. So let me go ahead and say at some level, it's hard not to wonder whether this order in Santa Clara was crafted in part to stick it to the 49ers, because it wouldn't surprise me if there was some truth to that. All right, the possibility of a bubble, Peter, something you mentioned at the top of the show. Mike Tirico at halftime of the Ravens-Steelers game interviewed Commissioner Roger Goodell. Here's what he had to say on Wednesday about the possibility of a bubble in the postseason.
Bubbles for the regular season seem tough to pull off. Have you started thinking about bubbles for the postseason?
Mike, our issue on bubbles, listen, the way it's perceived, I think, in the general public is that not something we would do because we believe that our protocols are working. We would consider further isolations to reduce the risks for all of our personnel so that they're not exposed to the virus and bring it into the facilities or to the club.
Peter, I've got a very simple assessment of the situation, and I've mentioned it from time to time, and I don't know that it's getting much traction. But at the end of the day, this is a collective bargaining stare down between the league and the union. The league doesn't want to go to the union and say, we want all the players to be confined to a hotel, because the union will say, no. No, we're not doing it unless you give us something, because that's how collective bargaining works. And anytime the union asks the NFL for something, the NFL doesn't say, that's a good idea. That's a win-win. We'll go ahead and do it. They say, we want something because you want something. And as a result, they're engaged in this stare down, and they'll come up with a word salad from time to time to justify it. But I believe that's the heart of it. The league doesn't want to ask, because the league knows if it asks, it's going to have to give something to the union that it doesn't currently owe the union.
Makes a lot of sense, Mike. And at the end of the day, the only way, in my opinion, that this is going to be forced, quite honestly, is if one team suffers, maybe even a playoff team, suffers a significant outbreak that causes them to miss multiple weeks. Because then the league can say both publicly and to the union, look, we cannot risk this happening in January. We just can't. We can't delay the playoffs for 2 weeks while we're waiting for Team X, the third seed in the AFC, to get healthy.
And from the union's perspective, it's a simple analysis, because people will say, well, and I've said it before earlier this year, hey, union, you just need to volunteer to do this. The union looks at it and says, well, they're still getting the games in. Until games are lost, it's not a relevant conversation. I'd like to think that folks would be committed to doing the right thing for the sport before games have to be lost, to get people to wake up and say, gee, maybe we should have home market bubbles. That's just not the way this specific brand of sausage is going to be made. They are going to continue to engage in this stare down, hope they can get through the season. And Peter, here's what I think is going to happen in the postseason, because I've talked to some coaches about this. There's a belief that you won't need mandatory bubbles in the postseason, that all the teams that are still alive, through the leadership exerted and the pressure applied by their leaders in the locker room, quarterbacks, defensive leaders, etc., they're all going to volunteer to stay in the hotel, so you never have to make it mandatory.
That's what the Saints proved was the smart way to go in the month of August. They had about 135 of 168, I think, people, either close contacts with players or players, stay in the Lowe's Hotel in New Orleans. They closed off the hotel except to the Saints. And so to me, especially in an environment that we're in right now, Mike, where business is zero, either travel and tourism or just travel in many of these cities, you can find a hotel, empty out the hotel for 8 days or however long it's got to be, and then maybe extend it to 14 days if the team wins and you have to come back. And that is the smartest way to go, because it allows you. I've also heard the discussion, Mike, that, if players go home, at least they're apart from everybody on their team. It's not like everybody is together all the time and you're going to have contact with people on the team with the risk of spreading it. No. What is going to happen is that because players all have and people all have single rooms, and they're all doing, the 49ers, even though they're down in Arizona and they're together, they're doing all of their learning virtually, sitting in their room, just like teams are doing all over the league right now. Juju Smith-Schuster told me a couple of weeks ago that, he basically used to get up and get up at 7 o'clock. He's out of his home at 7:45, and he's not home till after 3. Well, now he stays home until 11 because he's got all his meetings in the morning, by video conference. He gets in his car, he drives to the Steelers facility, does his practice, and then just goes home. And so that is the way it is, like with all these teams now. So to me, I really think that the bubble is a profitable way to go. It's a smart way to go, but it's going to take, in my opinion, a quasi-disaster for the NFL to get there.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.